Mr. Gottman. I'm Grace Liao from Sunli Television. Thank you so much for accepting our interview. We hope you could help us clarify some points. First, have you ever said that you would modify the content of your book after it was reprinted? The book has translated in several languages. Did you modify it, those editions?
You know, the book, my book has been published in German and also in Czech language. And I believe that it's going to be published in Japan early next year. Very excited about that. There are serious plans for a Hindi edition, an entire South Asia edition. And the fact is, all books have tiny little errors in them, and some of them have huge errors. Mine doesn't. It has tiny little grammatical errors. I spent 7 years researching the slaughter. It was not an instant book. And it's not an evolving document. It's not a political toy. I didn't change the text for the German or the Czech editions. I won't change it for the Japanese edition, and I won't change it for the Taiwanese edition either. I have never said that I would do so, and in fact, any speculation on that along that line has been a kind of campaign issue in 2014, which seems to have come back now in 2018.
Yes. In the hearing at Westminster Abbey, you mentioned that Dr. Kaur bring his patients to China for organs transplants. Will you consider modify your statement so far?
I think if I made that statement, what I was referring to was the text of the book. You see, the text that is in that book is essentially the same text that Dr. Ke signed off on in his letter, in our letter to him, where my research assistant wrote a long letter saying, in Chinese and in English, he said, you know, this is our best memory of the conversation. We know it was off the record, but could we go ahead and run this content? You'd be doing a great favor. Now, the one thing he also said was, he said, is it okay to run this content at all? In other words, we'll kill it. We won't run it. We won't run anything without your permission. And the second thing is there any changes that need to be made, right? Is there anything wrong with the account? Because this is being based purely on the author's memory here, okay? And we didn't take notes. Now, Dr. Ke's response was, the story seems okay. Okay?
Yes.
Now, that was his response. I don't know really what else a journalist can do under those kinds of conditions. You've shown them he speaks English. Dr. Ke speaks English. The interview was carried out in English. And I really don't know what else I could have done to verify this. I put down my best recollection. It's not perfectly clear what he was doing with patients on the mainland, whether he was some sort of middleman or whether he just reported back to the clinic somehow that, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it was the same hospital. I wrote down what I remembered of the conversation. And I wrote it down the best way, in the most authentic way I could, and he signed off on it. Now, this piece of paper, that letter, that email, is the only document that both sides have agreed to in writing.
Yes, yes, I know.
So,
yes, go ahead.
So I don't have all the answers about what he was doing in China, but I will say this. I want to say this right from the beginning of the interview. I made a tape about this in December 2014. At the time, I was hopeful. My interest is not the Taiwanese elections. My interest is not that at all. My interest is in getting the truth out about organ harvesting of political and religious prisoners in China. That is my interest. That is what I care about. That is what drives me. And I hoped dearly that Dr. Ke would see those esse and he would at that point become an advocate for this, that he would join the End Transplant Abuse in China, for example, which is my coalition. It's an international coalition. It's got people from all over the world. That he would join Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, that even if he wanted to distance himself from some aspects of the story, that he would become an advocate for this issue. And that didn't happen. That just didn't happen. And now we find ourselves in 2018, and people are asking questions again. And I must say, these questions are legitimate. It is perfectly legitimate for people to stand up and ask, why did you go to China 18 times? What exactly were you doing there? I understand that he's a popular mayor in many respects, and I understand that can be an appealing personality. I had some positive feelings when I was with him myself. But I believe, but this is a great, great crime which has taken place in China, and even peripheral involvement has to be looked at, has to be examined. And I believe that Taiwan is a democracy, and I believe you have a free press. And I believe it would be against Taiwan's nature to ignore these issues.
Yes, we would like to find what is the truth. Dr. Kaur said that you will modify that content of your reprinted book. Is that true or not? So we have to confirm that again, Mr. Gottman.
Oh, I'm sorry. You want to go back to this question? You would like to, will I modify the content of my book after it's translated?
Okay.
Yeah. No. I mean, you've seen one translation already of just part of the book. That came out in the newspapers. I had a friend read that. I don't speak Chinese. I apologize for that. I really do.
Yeah.
But I had a friend read it. Read this content, and he read it 3 times very closely with my book side by side, and he said this is accurate. I authorized that translation, for better or for worse.
Yes. So when...
And do I intend to... Obviously, I don't intend to change the content of the book. I didn't change it for the German edition. I didn't change it for the Czech edition. I won't change it for the Japanese edition, which is coming out next year. And I won't change it for the Hindi edition, which I also will come out next year, and so forth. We're not... This is a book that took me 7 years to research. I have great confidence in the book. It has a few tiny errors, but I really don't care about them because it's not an evolving document. It's meant to be a book for the ages.
So when did you tell Dr. Kaur that you would not modify your content?
Well, I tried to be very diplomatic because he was in a very tough mayoral race in 2014, yes? And so what... Me and my, he got a legal team. They sent me a letter saying that you have to change your book, and we responded. Okay, me and my attorney, Clive Ansley, wonderful guy, and what we did was we sent a letter back, and in fact it's the same letter that Dr. K held up in the debate. I believe it was the second debate. He was challenged by the KMT candidate about this issue, and he held up this letter and sort of said, well, Mr. Gutman, you see, says I'm a good man and honorable man. And he read that aloud. And as a matter of fact, as some people have told me, it was a dramatic thing. It sort of changed the debate. It helped matters for him greatly. Well, what did the letter not say? The letter did not say anything about changing the book. And only a few people seemed to notice that, though I'm sure his legal team understood that very, very well. Okay?
Yes.
But the point is, we didn't say anything about changing the book because we had no intention of changing the book. And what we were saying was that we think this has been misread or exaggerated at times, and we didn't feel that this was an appropriate way to talk about the mayoral election right at that point, especially when the book wasn't being really published in Taiwan.
Okay.
Now, I want to make it clear, I had really hoped, that Dr. Ko, who is a political novice at the time, it's his first time running for office, that he had just panicked. He had been in a situation where he was under tremendous pressure from the press and from his opponent, and that after the election, he would come around and he would sort of move to my position. In other words, he would, as I said, join coalitions, do something on the organ harvesting issue. Now, that did not happen. And frankly, I must say, that is a tragedy. Okay? That is not, it is not a tragedy so much perhaps it's a tragedy for Taiwan, but really it's a tragedy for the world. Witnesses are precious. They are hard to come by in this field. This subject, when I first began researching it, was considered a kidney in the bathtub story. It was considered to be an urban legend. It was considered to be an outrageous, toxic allegation. I didn't believe it myself when I began my research.
Yes.
So it's incredibly important. I just can't stress this, how important it is for people to come out and then stick to their story. I can give you an example of that, but let's get some more questions from you. Thank you.
So what, if anything, did Dr. Kaur say in your conversations about his patients traveling to China for organ transplants? Do you think that it is a criminal offense?
Well, Dr. Kaur went through that section of the interview, if you like, very quickly. It was vague. It wasn't really clear. Keep in mind, I was less interested in what he had done and much more interested in the issue that he had been told about Falun Gong organs from the mainland hospital, right? And the fact is, we went through this process of making sure that the content was okay, and he said the story seems okay. And as I understand it, and I'm not a judge or jury in Taiwan, of course, but as I understand it, assisting patients to get an organ was made into a criminal offense in 2015. Now, as I've said, Ko made 18 trips to China by his own admission, and Taiwan is a free press, so it's legitimate to ask him about what he was doing. I'm certainly not accusing him of a criminal offense. I don't have the evidence for that. And I admit that the write-up in the book is vague and could be interpreted several ways. But that is the write-up. That's both sides agreed upon. There's nothing I can do about that now. It's the only thing we have that's authentic. We can't change things because of political expediency.
Yes. Did Dr. Kaur negotiate for Chinese press? And in the U.S. congressional hearing, you mentioned that Dr. Kaur bring age or elderly patient to China for organ transplants. Can you elaborate on this? Specifically, what kind of patients and to what hospital?
I can't elaborate because I really don't know much more, and I'm not even sure that he, if I said it that way in the congressional hearing, it was a kind of, I don't know. I mean, I was just, perhaps I misspoke a little. I don't know if he brought patients over. I don't know if he cleared the way. Again, the text in the book suggests that he may have done some of that, or at least made a few phone calls to help people along the way. I don't know. But the point is, according to the interview that Dr. Ke signed off on, and my clear recollection to your question, did he negotiate prices? Yes, he did. The only correction I'd add to that is the Chinese price is actually, in the mainland, is actually 10% of the foreigner price, about that. So Ke got a 50% discount from the foreigner price, yes? For example, a kidney in Xi'an Military Hospital, okay, which is a really a cut-rate place to get a kidney, that would be about $3,000 US for a Chinese person. That would be about approximately $30,000 for a foreigner, and the Dr. Ke rate, if you like, would be about $15,000 for a Taiwanese.
So, confirm again, in your book, you mentioned that Dr. Kaur and the doctors in China had some getting to know you process that at the end of the process, the many Chinese doctors gave him a family price, you told me. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I just did. I mean, they said about 50%. Essentially, they were going to give him about a 50% discount on the usual foreigner price. I don't think this is actually so unusual. I think I've met many of Taiwanese businessmen when I used to operate in China, when I used to live in Beijing, and they were always looking for the Chinese price. They wanted to be treated as cousins or special cousins or brothers when they were in the mainland. That's not unusual. And part of the interview didn't strike me as that unusual either.
Yes. So how was Falun Gong discussed in conversations with Dr. Kaur?
Right. It's a great question. Well, it started because I was telling him about our field research. I was very upfront. I didn't do any sort of tricks in this thing. Remember, this is initially an off-the-record interview. And I told him that I was interviewing refugees, Falun Gong, mainly. At that time, it was mainly Falun Gong. I went on to do Uyghurs and Tibetans as well. But I described that they were getting similar physical examinations when they were in labor camp, and these examinations were of their kidneys and liver and heart and lungs sometimes, and their corneas. I mean, they even described their corneas being looked at by doctors with no corresponding eye test of any kind. And this struck me as, you know, it was as if they were just looking at the health of the organs that could be sold. Mm-hmm. Now, we had a confrontation at that point. He was very tense. That's all I can say. He was tense. It started out as an extremely tense interview. And when I described what I was looking at and said that I'm not from the CIA and I'm not here to wreck your business or anything like this, I said, is it true? And he said, yes, it's all true. Mm-hmm. And he was speaking about Falun Gong. He wasn't speaking about, I don't know, whatever he's saying now. He was speaking about Falun Gong. It was obvious to everyone in the room, there were three of us, that that's what was going on. Now, Ke told me the story and about him looking into price and quality in a mainland hospital and having what the way he made it sound was this was an unexpected result, as these doctors came back and said, we're going to give you 50% of the price, and we want you to know that these are high quality organs. They're not prisoners. They're not normal prisoners. They're not drug addicts or people who've had hard lives. All these organs are going to come from Falun Gong. Now, what happened with that? I can't say for sure. I can just tell you what's written in my book, and that's why my book's important. I really don't want to change that or alter it because, as I said, that's the only piece. This is the only thing that both sides have agreed on. It's valid. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yes. Yeah. Dr. Kaur did mention that these organs are from Falun Gong participants who lead healthy lifestyle. Is that true? Is that right?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question one more time, please?
This is Dr. Kaur did mention that these organs are from Falun Gong, and this is the practitioner who lead healthy lifestyle, right?
No. He did not mention that. This is very important. The doctors in China, mainland doctors at one hospital, I don't know which hospital, he didn't volunteer that information, mentioned that these organs would come from Falun Gong. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yes.
This is the critical thing, and this is I just do want to, I don't know if you'll edit this out or whatever, but I do want to make this one point. It's very important. Now, if you look here, mm-hmm. It says all the organs will come from Falun Gong, okay?
Yes.
All the organs will come from Falun Gong. That does not mean that Dr. Ke said that statement. That's a journalistic style in America, sometimes the UK, where we sort of say, you say something that was said to the person or that they're reporting back to you and you put it underneath their picture. It's a kind of cool style to do something in. It's not meant to say that he said all the organs will come from Falun Gong. No, the mainland doctors said that to me. Remember, this is what I was interested in. I wasn't particularly interested in Dr. Ke. And don't forget, he was just a doctor then. He wasn't your mayor, the mayor of Taipei. Yeah. So it was not. The important thing was that he was telling me a real story, and I believe he told me a real story. Now, I don't believe he told me everything, mm-hmm. but I do believe that the part of it that he told me was real. I've been warned not to use the word confessional because it sounds so terrible. But I have to say that there was a big difference between the man that I sat down with at the interview in the beginning, and I described this in the book, who was hostile and defensive, and the man who told us this story. Okay? There was a big difference in the way he spoke. There are a lot of mysteries about that interview. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A lot of mysteries.
An American publisher with a Taiwanese partner has released a partial translation of your book, The Slaughter. Is the translation accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah, the translation, look, my Mandarin is poor, and I really apologize for this failing. I've never been able to speak another language. I've tried many times. Look, but I have many friends who speak Mandarin, and one of them, who I really trust, read the translation 3 times side by side with my book in English, and he said it's an accurate translation. And so I signed off on that translation. Now, what people say about that translation, I can't control that, and I'm not I couldn't control that if I wanted to, and I'm not interested in controlling that. But what people around the world translated The Slaughter, and they translated the Chinese edition of The Slaughter already. Most of the chapters are in some form of translation into Mandarin, and I'm grateful to these people. And I also want to state another thing. I am grateful to my publishers for bringing The Slaughter to Taiwan and ultimately to China. And I only wish I could say the title of the book in Chinese. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, okay. Is there a recording of your interview with Dr. Kaur?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there a recording of your interview with Dr. Kaur?
Very good, Grace. Yes. The interview was, by prior agreement, by a phone call, the interview was off the record. Okay? We have an expression, off the record. Off the record, to everybody, means no recording, no notes. Okay? That means, look, I interviewed refugees across the world who had family in China, who were Falun Gong, okay, or Uyghurs. And the fact is, people in China could have died if I had lied to them. If they had said, I need an off-the-record conversation, if they had said, I can't be taped, or I can't be identified, if I had lied about any of that, people would have died. I could not live with myself. So look, no tape, okay? I don't bring tapes to things. It's ludicrous. Why would I bring a tape if a guy didn't want to be taped? This just seems normal to me. Now, the fact is, in 2014, Dr. Ko's people claimed they had a tape. They claimed this twice, I think. I don't know. They sort of said it at one time, said it again. Now, my researcher remembers the interview much the same way I do. I mean, the same subject matter, same talk. But fine, if Dr. Ko secretly taped the conversation, release it. Release it. The tape will sound, I think it'll support my account. Okay? So until then, my account is the only one that both sides have, I'm sorry to repeat myself here, but it's the only account that both sides have signed off on, and that's why it's in this book. Yes. Now, yeah. Thanks.
So why is the interviews with Dr. Kaur important to you?
I don't just represent myself here, Grace. I'm not just a reporter. In 2018, I guess is a little different than 2014.
Yes.
Because I'm a representative of a much larger movement. And that movement is not just Falun Gong anymore. It is end transplant abuse in China. It is Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting. It is, to some extent, the U.S. Congress. Okay? It is there are medical ethicists across the globe, doctors, surgeons, lawyers, journalists such as D.D. Kirsten Tatlow from the New York Times. You'll notice the only group I'm leaving out is refugees from Chinese labor camp. And the reason I'm leaving that out is because these are people who carry around an immense amount of pain, whose families have been broken up, whose families have been ripped apart. And I can't claim to represent them. In fact, I'd say that they're the only moral authority we have in this case. In fact, I don't have the moral authority here. Dr. Ko does not have the moral authority here. Mr. Wu does not have the moral authority here. None of us do. They do. Okay? And I think what they want, ultimately, if I can speak for them for a second, they are asking for the truth.
Yes. So what's the key reason that made you a 2017 Nobel Prize nominee?
The slaughter. And, yeah, just the slaughter. That's one I'm supposed to keep really secret. Look, the nomination did come from inside Westminster, and that's all I'm supposed to say about it, by tradition. By tradition. There's no law on this. But that's the tradition, is to not talk about where your nomination came from. But thank you for asking. So.
The last question, but this is very important. Are you willing to testify if Taiwan court summon you?
Good Lord. I don't see why I wouldn't be willing to testify, of course. But, you know, I think, can I ask you, can I make a statement here? Mm-hmm. Could I make a statement? Look, over the last week, many Taiwanese citizens have spoken to me on social media very directly. I'm a very open person, and anybody who's gone to my Facebook page has noticed that. Now, many of these people were not supporters of Dr. Ke. They weren't enemies of Dr. Ke either. They were asking me politely for one thing: resolution, a resolution to this situation. And I want to say that I'm sorry. I can tell you the truth of one interview. In fact, it's already in the book. But I cannot provide anyone with resolution. The fact is, Chinese organ harvesting, David Matus has compared it to a virus. He said it's a virus, we have to fight it. And it will spread ultimately from China. And so if you ask me, as indeed you should, what can Taiwan do about this problem? My answer is that Taiwan can clean its hands. Taiwan can investigate. Taiwan can take responsibility. Maybe there are other Taiwanese medical personnel who became involved in this terrible trade. There may be all kinds of motivations for that. All of those motivations need to be taken into account. It'll be messy. But if Taiwan investigates, if it lets the free press operate, if it has this discussion, as uncomfortable as it may be, it can act as a beacon to the world. It shows the world how a true democracy takes responsibility for its actions, and Taiwan can clean its hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your investigating reporting. We wish you the best of luck